All right, this is super exciting. We are live, and I am live with no other than Avi Lewis. Avi Lewis, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me
So,
on.
yeah, my pleasure. This is going to be fun. So, for those that don't know, Avi is he works at Meta. He's an engineer. He's an OLEF from Australia. He's a social media marketer. He understands social media very well. He does a lot of marketing about Israel and Israel advocacy. He talks a lot about the tech industry in Israel, particularly on LinkedIn and even in Hebrew. And so he's a man very up down my alley. And you're not the first person recommended. How come I'm not hanging out with Avi? Because we do a lot of similar stuff, but we don't really hang out. So I'm excited to have you on. It's gonna be fun.
Likewise.
Awesome. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, the Israel tech scene, something you know very well about, and the layoffs and everything that's going on. Can you explain to us how is Israel reacting relating to the, let's say, the economic challenges as opposed to, let's say, America?
So the
tech industry in particular.
So I don't think that the Israeli tech system is separate from the American tech system. I mean, you see the layoffs as they're happening in the last year or so, they're global. So they're not just happening in the States and in Europe, they're also happening here in Israel. A lot of the venture capital that's flowing into Israel is coming from US-based VCs. A lot of these global companies, they'll have an office in Tel Aviv. So you see a lot of the Fortune 500 companies that have been laying off employees. It's also affected Tel Aviv. So Israel definitely is not on sort of its own little bubble in like a larger global tech scene. It's definitely a part and parcel of the global tech scene. So it's been
awesome.
Really effective.
Is it different in any way? Is there any way that it deviates per se? Because I mean, culturally, we have things in common with American tech, but also some culturally things are very different. I find the demographic also is a little different, and I think it's just in general, it's Israel. I hear, most people that are working in tech, I wouldn't say most, but American people that are working in tech usually don't are less likely to have families compared to their Israeli counterparts. You're seeing there's a little bit of difference in there. It's overwhelmingly in San Francisco, just like overwhelmingly Tel Aviv. And I think you get a lot of the culture of those cities in particular. But would you say if it does, is there any deviation into the recession for Israeli tech versus American tech?
Well, to answer the first question about differences between the tech scenes, firstly, I mean, Israel definitely is punching above its weight in terms of global tech in every single way, in terms of venture capital dollars per capita that are flowing in here, the number of startups and unicorns per capita, the number of founders that are coming and graduating from Israeli universities. You just look at every global metric, and on a per capita basis, like Israel is one of the global leaders, like far ahead of most European countries. And definitely on par with the US. So there definitely is some underlying factor here that is quite special. That is causing this flourishing of the tech ecosystem here in Israel. In terms of cultural differences, of course there are cultural differences. We're here in the Middle East. I think that the reasons behind the creation of the tech ecosystem and why it's developed are totally different in Israel compared to, say, the US or Europe or even China. And you also just see that in the workplace, right? An Israeli tech workplace where most of the employees are Israeli, there's going to be a different culture and vibe to a startup that's based in the US, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So tell us a little bit about your story, right? Well, why'd you make Aliyah from Australia? How did you land? How did you get into tech? How did you end up leading things up over at Meta Tel Aviv?
So I made Aliyah right out of high school from Australia. I was born and raised there. My parents are still there. Most of my family's still there. It was really important for me to come to Israel. I really felt I wanted to be part of this amazing story that is Israel, be part of Jewish history and really experience and live that full richness that you have here. And really just be on the stage of Jewish history, which is, you can have a very comfortable life in a place like Australia, in the States and other Western countries. But I was looking for some deeper underlying meaning. So I came here at 18. I eventually, after my army service, I studied computer science and liberal arts here in Israel, at an Israeli university. And from there, I did an internship towards the end of my college degree at Meta's Tel Aviv office. Back then, it was called Facebook. And from there, I got an offer.
So old.
Yeah.
But so like, yeah, go ahead. I got to interrupt you. Yeah.
Right, and basically the internship, it's a 3-month program for students. It's global, by the way, so you also have it in the States. And the idea behind it is you basically join a team for 3 months. You work on a high profile project, and at the end, depending on your performance, you can get a return offer to come back there and work full time. So after I finished my degree, I came as a full time employee, and now I've been here in the Meta's Tel Aviv office for nearly 4 years.
Lovely. So I speak to a lot of Olim, and a lot of people say the same thing that you did when it came to making Aliyah, is that they're like, yeah, there's comfort, there's better living, better cost of living was probably more accurate in a lot of Western countries. And what they find out is they want to be part of history, want to be part of destiny, have more meaning in their life. That was the word you use that I do hear a lot. And it's kind of cool. You feel like you're an active player in history, not just, ash to ash, dust to dust, like a lot of people feel that when they're living other places. If someone is a little scared, let's say, to make Aliyah alone, a young person, let's say, if you were to give advice to younger you, what would you tell them if, they're like worried about being away from family? How am I going to find an income? How am I going to find friends, a community? How do I land? What do I do? I don't understand or speak like a Hebrew. What would you recommend to that person that wants to make Aliyah? And then second, I want to ask you the same thing about, in particular, how would an Ole or not Ole get into tech?
So those are both great questions. I think with the first question, my advice to someone who sees himself long-term in Israel would be make Aliyah as early as possible and integrate yourself into Israeli society as much as you can. I think that, again, I don't have statistics, but just anecdotally, I think the older people are when they make Aliyah, the harder it is for them to learn Hebrew, the harder it is for them to sort of integrate into Israeli society. And then the chances of them remaining in Israel long-term are lower. Most people who I've seen a lot of the people who I know who have basically remained in Israel long-term have made Aliyah quite young, and they've very thoroughly integrated into society by immersing themselves in Hebrew, and they've come out with really good Hebrew. The other two groups I would say would be people who either married Israelis or married here and now they live here with their spouse, or people who have come here as religious for religious reasons. So I would say those are basically like the three groups that you see really stayed here. By the way, I also know lots of people who just came to serve in the army and then they returned back to their home countries. There are other people who I know who made Aliyah really early on, served and then left because they couldn't make it work because they didn't find their opportunities here. So obviously everyone has their own path, but I think that getting in here as early as you can to really build yourself up here from scratch, like build your career here, build your educational resume here, immerse yourself in Hebrew so that you don't feel like you have to attach yourself to an English bubble in order to exist, that you can really just like interact with everyone and take advantage of all the opportunities that you have here. I think that would be my main advice to a young person who really sees themselves long-term in Israel.
Awesome. Great. Got it. So you're talking about, you mentioned something that was interesting. And I think this is a growing concern, is that like people that came here, went to the army, couldn't find opportunities. So let's say they went back. What opportunities are they usually looking for? Why did they fail to find them? Were these people had no chance like from the beginning because let's say their approach? So if one wanted to make Aliyah, army or not, whether they're coming in, out of high school or college, or, if they're coming in their early 30s with a couple kids, what would you recommend? How do you recommend for them to make sure that they are able to like, they want to stay so they don't have a failing landing?
Yeah, so I think that it's a very individual question. I think that if you look at like employment opportunities here, where you can sort of like live a middle-class lifestyle, to be honest, like outside of tech, there aren't so many great opportunities unless you have an in like some industry. So it's to be honest, like it's sort of like a one industry kind of ecosystem over here. Like
I think we should talk about that for a minute. Why is that?
I think that the tech ecosystem here is the outlier and not the other stuff. Like if you look at Israel, like from its founding up until the 90s, it was a relatively agrarian economy. It had pockets of manufacturing. It was mostly agricultural, huge public sector. So most people would work for government or for the military. So the outlier here is the tech ecosystem that developed here in the 90s, and not the other way around. So like the fact that we have this burgeoning tech sector that has enabled hundreds of thousands of Israelis to live middle class plus lifestyles, I think that really is the outlier, and not the other way around. Like most of Israel is still like earning, below average wages.
Yeah, I find that there's a lot of not regulation, protexia, that are in these old industries and newer industries such as tech. It's hard to catch up with the regulation, and also I think the country understands this is the golden goose, right? That it's giving golden eggs, and you don't want to kill the goose.
Yeah, I mean, like you see that a disproportionate amount of sort of tax money is flowing in from high tech into government coffers, right? You see a huge amount of innovation that's happening specifically here. And like the tech ecosystem really developed because of kind of like the technological units in the army, like the 8200, the 990 units, like all of those people, like in the early 90s, like you think about success stories like Checkpoint, right? Like these are people who graduated from those units. And as tech was becoming a thing with the creation of the World Wide Web in the early 90s and like the very start of that ecosystem, so you had people who were with a technological background that were well positioned to create that. But like the rest of the country, I think the rest of industry is somewhat lagging behind. And you also just like see like the number of people, again, I'm exposed to this, so I don't have statistics, but just like the number of people who are looking to pivot away from what their current occupation and into high tech is huge. Like social workers, people who are lawyers, like Israel. I read a statistic that Israel has one of the highest per capita number of lawyers in the world.
Yeah.
So you have huge supply and not enough.
I would have thought it would have been America, but
right.
It's that a lot of people study law,
right,
here in particular.
Yeah. And so it's measured by like the number of registered lawyers, like people who are sitting and passing the bar exam, right? So you have this massive supply, not enough demand, that brings the wages of lawyers down. So a lawyer in like Australia or the States can live a very comfortable lifestyle, but here in Israel, a lot of these young lawyers are basically abandoning the profession of law and trying to seek an inroads into high tech. Right. And I think that really is symptomatic of a lot of different industries: social workers, teachers, policemen, a lot of these industries, healthcare. Like I know of numerous people with medical degrees, doctors, who are looking to transition to get into med tech advisory roles and to like leave behind the public sector. So you see, and again, like I think that something that isn't discussed really is sort of like the long-term impact on Israeli society, where you have this one single industry which is attracting a huge amount of talent, and it's sort of there's like an internal brain drain where you sort of have a lot of very smart, talented, and ambitious people in a lot of the other service-based industries like education, healthcare, psychology, and so forth, social work, who are leaving those industries and moving into high tech, or conversely, people who maybe want to study and go into some education to be like a teacher, but instead of that, they're looking at the level of compensation and the kind of conditions that they're going to have as a teacher in the education system, and they're deciding instead to just go straight into high tech. So I think there are some like big societal there's consequences related to the fact that it's sort of like a one industry country.
Do you think, since so many people are entering high tech, wouldn't you think that like supply and demand, wouldn't that bring the prices, the salaries of high tech down? Because up until the recession, the salaries of high tech have just been rapidly increasing. There's been a correction, I would say. It's probably for the best. But do you think that like there's a further correction? Do you think people are overpaid in tech? Not that value isn't there, but kind of just like you were saying, the lawyers don't earn that much in Israel because Israel has the most lawyers per capita than any other country. So it drives down the compensation. Do you feel that do you think that there's something there also in cybersecurity, in tech? Because if we have so many people that want to enter tech, that we're able to great, there's so much demand for people to entering, that we'll see a drop in compensation for people in tech?
I think that's a good question. It's really hard to tell because I think that salaries are a derivative of the amount of profits that are flowing in, right? So if you're looking at a service-based industry, especially one that is in the public sector, so it's not a competitive market. Like the education ministry sets the exact salary that a teacher is going to receive based on their the number of years that they've been in the field and stuff like that. But
that's why Israel's education system sucks.
Right. To be honest, I don't actually know that it's that different in other countries, right? Like my father-in-law he's in the education system in Canada, and usually in the public sector, like your salary will not then necessarily be determined by performance, but
right. That's why there's no compensation. The government schools here are garbage. So you're right. We just had you have children, Avi?
Yeah.
Any of them in government schools?
All of them.
Oh,
as
okay.
in like they're young. I have one who now entered into the government school system, and one she's in private care.
Got it. Right. Okay. So you have like kindergarten, they call it America. So, right. So I'm just curious, as someone who's very conscious about these things going on. There was a teachers union strike. They had some crazy demands. The Israeli government was pushing back. We want to see some meritocracy, like you were saying. Let's get good teachers be paid better. Let's fire the shitty teachers. The unions were against it. They want to pay people based on the amount of years. Anyway, the teachers unions got 90% of what they wanted. Do you think education is going to be better this year than last year?
So I'm not privy to all the details of the agreement that the teachers union made with the education department and government, but to be honest, I'm not so optimistic. Also, I remember reading that there was a clause that the teachers union promised not to strike for like the next 2 years, meaning there's probably a strong chance that there may be an additional strike down the road, even like in another couple of years, in order to receive additional demands. To be honest, though, like these are really big questions that have multiple underlying factors. So I don't know if it's like privatizing the teachers sector, for example. That's not like a simple feat. I don't know if it's even been
right. You don't have to privatize it. You can move to a voucher system, right? Where Israel, I think after America is like the second highest, maybe even the highest, the education money spent per education per child per year is through the roof. I mean, it's not going to get any better just by putting more money after bad, right? Well, obviously, we have a broken system. And you mentioned it, and everyone else knows, they say teachers are underpaid. My response is good teachers are significantly underpaid. A lot of them shouldn't be teaching, especially ones that have been there for many years, been protected by the unions, or should have been fired a long time ago. I find the newer teachers that are entering are better than, let's say, the ones that have been there for a long time that just see it as like a 10-year job. Those are my thoughts. All right, we'll see where the future is. How much education do you think plays actually a part into being able to get back into tech?
Well, I mean, tech is sort of like a buzzword. I mean, if you look in tech, it's a vast ecosystem with many different roles, many different startups. Like you have people who are in technical roles who are usually there after a significant amount of education. So a computer science degree, people who are doing like more advanced stuff like AI and machine learning, data science. Those are usually people with PhDs. So based on like the level of sophistication, you would see like someone with a very, very thorough educational background. And then there's obviously a ton of other roles as well that form the backbone of every startup, from HR, customer success, marketing, operations, that don't necessarily require particular accreditation or a formal degree. So I think it really varies on the position.
Mm-hmm. So if you're not actually doing the tech itself, like you said, machine learning, AI, data processing, et cetera, you don't need a degree to enter into tech and earn and do well based on on the backbone of like the wave of tech. Was that correct? Well,
Yes.
What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to help people understand how they can get in tech so they can navigate it better, and so that they can know what their options are based on their current education, or their networking, or their skills, or their languages, et cetera, so people can have a better idea. Because I think there isn't anyone that knows as well as you of how they were to get into tech. And so hopefully we're able to do that and help people create a better living for themselves and provide greater opportunities for Israeli technology companies. So outside of, let's say, the engineering, like the machine learning, those that you mentioned, those doing marketing, HR, and all that too, are people looking for college degrees? Is that expected? Is that a plus? Or in my case, I think it's a negative usually. If you're under 30 and you have a college degree, it's probably a bad life decision if you're not studying STEM.
So I would actually extend that, and I would say that even in engineering roles, you don't need a college degree necessarily in order to enter those roles. So if you sort of just compare to your typical white collar professions such as law or medicine, say like even today, like those are degrees where you need to be accredited in order to enter. Like I can't, like, doesn't matter how talented I am in filing tax reports and doing law like tax. If I submit my resume to a law firm without a law degree, they're not going to look at me. But you have a 15-year-old, super, like a genius wonder kid who's been like coding since age 3, is like living in his mother's basement. Like he submits his resume to Google, like he might get in because they're looking for skills, right? It's like a
right. They dropped college. I know Google and Apple. They
also
dropped,
Facebook
and Facebook, right? Also,
yeah.
They dropped college like a few years ago, right? You don't need to have college degrees.
So there's
better talent that didn't go to college. You can think more objectively. You get them when they're younger. They expect to be paid less. And people walk out with a college degree and say, "Hey, I got this piece of paper. I want to be paid more." And we're like, "No." Someone of your same age, we should get paid more with no college degree because they've been working in the private sector already for the last few years. Do you think this is? Do you think this? Would you say this applies throughout all of Israeli tech? That if they see talent, they don't care for college degrees. And do you think that the college system is no longer necessary in order to get into, let's say, STEM, particularly in Israel? I know of course, there are many exceptions. But do you think people are looking for it less? Because I do know people still looking for, like, what is your Army experience? Have you been to the Army? And how much that helps. Of course, if you're an OLED, they understand that, and they'll make an exception that you weren't in the Army. They understand that as an immigrant. But do you think that, so if one doesn't have a college degree and they want to get into engineering, how would they, like, do they need a college degree in order to be able to do that?
Short answer is no. Long answer is maybe. I think for most people, having a college degree in a relevant STEM field is a ticket in to get into a.
You would say it's a ticket, so you'd have no problem. You wouldn't have trouble getting in. Is that true if you have a STEM degree?
Correct.
Generally speaking. I mean, of course, some bunch of people suck and they won't, but let's say 90% of the people that have a STEM degree, they should be able to get a job in tech. Is that correct?
I think that someone who's talented, who does not have a STEM degree, and who can prove their talent via relevant background and experience, they will land a technical role. Someone who has a degree isn't necessarily guaranteed a role. But I think for most people, going through the college route is one of the most prevalent avenues to land sort of their first job in high tech, because it is a standardized system. And basically it is one of the ways that you can sort of prove on a resume, in lieu of like actual experience, that you know your stuff. Because at the end of the day, even though it's not it's not a certification based field or role like law or medicine, you still have to get through that first gatekeeper, which is the recruiters or the sources who are looking over your resume, and you have to prove that you have the skill set to be able to work in that role, and therefore it's not a waste of time to be invited to invite you to an interview, because they're looking at like 100 resumes for one open position, and they don't have the capacity now to invite 100 people and to interview every single person selectively. So you still need to be able to prove somehow that you have the skill set. I think that having a college degree for most people provides them with a framework to acquire that knowledge. Some people, of course, may not need it. Like if some people have the discipline to sort of study on their own and to sort of grasp the material on their own, you don't necessarily need that college degree. I think a lot of people do. But at the end of the day, for someone who is sort of going the independent path and learning on their own, how do you prove at the end of the day, if you're going for an entry-level job, how do you prove at the end of the day that you have the skills and the experience to be able to succeed in that role, right? So even though on the one hand, you don't necessarily need to have a STEM college degree in order to work in a technical role, for a lot of people, that is their ticket in.
You need to demonstrate competence,
Yeah.
and colleges
Yes.
and a degree in STEM is one way to demonstrate
Right.
the amount of competence.
I can just tell you, and I can just tell you anecdotally, like based on people who I know who work with me or who work or friends of mine who work at other companies. I've seen people who have gotten their first job post computer science degree. Some who don't have a computer science degree at all, but they have a relevant technological background from the army. And then there are some people who have neither, and they've sort of gone the independent route. So there are people like that. I think they're definitely the minority, but you do have stories, right? So unlike
now, those network, like I'm just wondering, like how much does networking play a part? So like, can you network your way if you don't have the degree? So I'm just trying to think, right? I'm an OLED. I have no connections in tech. I mean, I do marketing for tech, but obviously I need to just strongly network into tech. I enjoy networking. It's fun. I love meeting new people. It's great. I love learning about new companies, the cool things they're doing. But like, if you're here, you're an OLED, and you're like, yo, I got excellent English. That's a plus. No Hebrew. And I want to get into tech. I don't have a tech degree. Okay, that's fine. You know, I can hustle. I can grind. I'll work for almost nothing or even free just to get that experience. How do we want to network to get themselves in if they don't have, as you call it, the ticket of college education for STEM, or even if they're not in STEM, let's say, whatever, how do you network yourself into being able to get into tech so you can earn a great living?
So I think that having a network is extremely important. By the way, not just in Israel, anywhere, right? Like the number of people who I know who have landed jobs because, you know, a friend of theirs has sort of submitted their resume on their behalf or have recommended them. So a lot of people get in that way, but I also think that there's a limit to how much a network can help you in terms of it, depending on the role. So for example, for a technical based role, no amount of networking will get you in if it's a merit-based position that requires that you demonstrate certain skill sets. So if you don't know how to code, it doesn't matter how great your network
obviously you're not going to get a job in coding, right? I understand that, you know.
But then for like positions that require more of like a soft skill set that are maybe a little bit more ambiguous in terms of the background that they require, I would assume that a network there would play a larger role, especially for entry-level jobs where you don't necessarily have that demonstrated experience on your resume.
Got it. Excellent. All right. So how would one network then? Like, would you recommend them go to Nefesh B'Nefesh? They just go to conferences, go with their CV and go to table and, hey, are you hiring? Hey, are you hiring? Here's my strength. Here's my CV. Like, what would you recommend? Would you find someone you know and ask them, hey, do you know someone? And can you connect me with them? And you know what I mean? Like, how did that happen? Like, you and I are connected here because of Gabe Dweck, who does marketing now at APAC, who's my stepbrother and who's a friend of yours. And so we got connected and I asked him, hey, who do you know? You know what I mean? It'll be worth talking to that has good conversations about tech and recruitment to help people. And he recommended you. Like, is that just the way to go? Just go and ask people you know. But if you don't really know people, should you go ahead and just reach out to, you know, who do you like? Do you think conferences help? I don't mean like job fairs. I mean serious conferences. Do you think those help?
I think all of the above. Like someone who is looking for work, right? Like I'm a big philosophy is trying to open as many doors as possible, or rather knocking on as many doors as possible with the hope that one of them opens up, right? Like putting as many fishing rods along the seashore with the hope that one of them catches onto a fish.
Right.
So like definitely like everything that you mentioned and more. Starting to create a friend group, joining the right Facebook and LinkedIn groups that are specifically geared towards Olim. If we're talking specifically now about Olim trying to get into tech, going to conferences, going to meetups, speaking to people who are, you know, maybe even cold calling and reaching out to people who work in particular startups or in roles that you're interested in, inviting them over for like a coffee and saying like, tell me about like what your role is. How do I get in? What does your day-to-day look like? And by the way, that's also another really important point. I know a lot of people who have a particular dream about getting into a certain role. And then once they've finally achieved that role and once they're there, they realize how much they dislike it. I know
it's like most people study law and then they actually go into law and they're like, screw this shit.
Yeah, so even just as an exercise, if you have a particular dream job, like find someone who is in that role, invite them over for like
I
a
say
coffee,
this
and
to
then like
everyone when
speak.
you're a
Yeah,
teen. It's so tragic how many people, and this is much more relevant, let's say, for America or outside of Israel, where they go into college when they're older after the army. How many people go and study something and they don't understand what the day to day of that work is? You know what I mean? Like, I've shown many people that like always want to be doctors and they became a doctor and they're like, oh, that's great. 60% of my time is freaking paperwork for the government. Like it's unreal. It's like I came to help people, not be a not to push papers for bureaucrats, and or whatever it is. It's like it's fascinating. I do recommend, and I was told my wife this that when our daughters are older, when they're 15, that we would like them actually to shadow other professionals to see what they do for a full day, so you actually get an idea. Because a lot of things seem cool and you have no idea what you want to do. I mean, I said before, like I almost studied architecture. I got a scholarship and everything at Philadelphia University, and I was super excited. I love architecture, but then it turns out I didn't even know the difference. I love building. I loved engineering. Right now, I didn't. I only found that out like several years after that. I didn't end up. I ended up studying business, by the way, which is definitely a better decision. But I thought I was. I know I enjoy architecture, but I didn't want to do it for a living. You find out what they do all day. They're locked up in their office. It's very antisocial. A lot of the work, right? And a lot of is putting in bids in order to get projects. I guess that's relevant to anyone, any kind of office. But I think a lot of people don't even know what they're getting into. There's a big mismatch there. A lot of people don't know what it is. From the outside, things look great. Once you get it, you end up hating it. And I think that's also true for a lot of people in tech, because I think the demand for, even though the work isn't manually or physically difficult, the hours demanded, I think, are far greater than a lot of even the blue collar workers that do work physically harder.
yeah. I mean, when it comes to tech, especially now with the transition to remote work, so the lines between sort of work-life balance are blurred in a sense, especially if you're working from home. And
Right.
especially
Yeah.
if
My
you're
whole company, we're 100% remote work from home. We're 24 people, so we know.
right. So I think I read a study somewhere. I don't remember where. Whereby it turns out that people who work remotely actually work longer hours than if they work from the office, right? Because generally people who work from the office,
the commute and all that, right? Yeah.
right? So but you have the 9 to 5, and then you switch off after that once you get home. But like when you work from home, so
It's
you
not
could
9 to 5. I mean, it's like 8:30 to 6. Even people go to the
with
offices.
with like, oh yeah, whatever it is. But like at home, for example, like you could be starting work at like 8 a.m. Sure, like in the middle you're getting a break, you're picking up your kids from like kindergarten
Right.
at 3, but then you're going back
Uh-huh.
online at 6 until 10
I
p.m.
think it's a great thing, by the way. I think work-life balance is a lie. I believe in work-life integration. That kind of like during the work hours, you have your own personal shit you have to do. And your job shouldn't say, no, you can't go to the dentist in the middle of the day, or go buy new glasses, or go buy new sneakers, or pick up some errands so you don't have to do it after you get home. You know what I mean? And you're tired, and then, do what you need. And if you want to go out for a long lunch with your spouse, I think that's cool. Or take your kid out, you know what I mean, on their birthday and all of that. Doesn't mean it should be a vacation day. And then in the evening, it means like you get your work done, and you might have to work more in the evening, get a better head start in the morning, maybe. And that kind of like work is an integral part of your life. So is your personal life. So is your family. So are your errands. And all of these things are relevant 24 hours. Right. And so we shouldn't say, okay, now I'm only doing this and now I'm not doing that. That's not how real life is.
I totally agree with you, but I definitely think that kind of ability to integrate work and life, as you put it, is really limited to basically like the high-tech industry. So
Right.
you
People
have
that
people who
can,
are,
the jobs that can work remote, right?
right.
Blue collar, that isn't the case. But even I know a lot of people that, let's say, are blue collar. Well, if they're self-employed, it's different. They'll go out and they'll do things, they'll run errands in
Right.
between. And, you'll go out to a job and, oh, this is near the supermarket. Let me go pick up some things at the pharmacy. I had that prescription I was going to get tomorrow. Instead, let me grab it now, take an extra 10 minutes. So I think you do get it as long as you're either like moving around for your job, or if you can work from home, then I think you can do it. But if you're working at a plant, as an example, whether it's manufacturing or you're doing R&D in an med tech biology, then also I would understand that there isn't that integration.
Yeah. So when it comes to, so one, I mean, I think COVID has really basically created a huge shift in the mindset of the high tech industry to make it more of like a remote first or remote friendly. But one of the things that we're seeing now, specifically in the last 2-3 weeks with Elon Musk's ownership of Twitter, where he's basically asked all of workers to come back full-time in office 5 days a week. So maybe we're actually going to see like a backlash to that and like a reverse trend. And it'll be really interesting to see, down the track, which sort of version of sort of like employee to workplace high-tech relations is going to win out. Is it going to be the narrative of sort of the work-life integration that you spoke about, or is it going to be sort of like this sort of back to like the cubicle 1990s, like everyone at the office 5 days a week? And I'm not quite sure who's going to win out, because if Elon Musk's experiment does end up producing results, we might actually see a domino effect across the board. In all the
it's amazing that power that he has there. Actually, but he does think differently. That it's not like come to the office and work. It's like come to the office and come and work insane hours, and we're going to do something radical that's going to change the world. I'm going to compensate you well. You're going to get a lot of meaning, and there's this brotherhood or sister, this workhood of like we're all in this, staying late. Kind of like in the army, or that like we're in this together. We're building something together. We're working really hard. We're sacrificing. And I think there's something greater about that. And I don't think that appeals to the overwhelming majority of the population. Most people don't want that. Most people want a kind of a life outside of work. Some people love that. Some people will say, hey, I'd love to do that in my 20s, right? And then thereafter, maybe not. So I don't think it's sustainable. I'm an Elon Musk fan, but I don't think it's a sustainable model. I think that might only be relevant to 2% of the population would love to do that. And maybe 15-20% of the population like to do that through their 20s, knowing that they're being compensated well. And even though it's a lot of work, it's fun work. So I don't know. I don't think that's going to really stick. Regarding, you do some social media marketing in Hebrew. Why? Why not in English? Especially because on LinkedIn, you write a lot in Hebrew, and everyone in tech reads English, maybe even me as an example. I read English well, not Hebrew so well. Do you think, why do you post in Hebrew?
So the answer is basic supply and demand. I started, obviously English is my mother tongue. I learned Hebrew only after I came to Israel when I was 18. So it's my second language. I started posting regularly on Hebrew on LinkedIn after I saw that the level of engagement that I received there on my Hebrew posts was much higher than my English posts. And I think that the reason for that was that, like, as you mentioned, most people in high tech speak English. It's an English-based ecosystem. It's global facing. So there was a bit of a stigma around Hebrew on LinkedIn. It was sort of viewed as like non-professional. Like if you want to appear like that, you're very like sort of global and professional, and you're part of like the global tech workforce. Do English. But like if obviously if you want to do some post on Facebook something personal, and you're an Israeli, then you'll do that in Hebrew to reach out to the people around you. I actually decided to do the opposite, just because I saw the level of engagement that I was receiving in Hebrew was like huge, out of this chart, something like 5 or 10x what I was getting in my English posts. And I think the reason was,
wait, do you mix up English now in your post too?
No. So I post only in Hebrew right now. Very occasionally, I'll throw out a post, like a feeler post in English. And
do you find that engagement still lags behind?
Yeah, I think that the level of engagement I get on my English posts is 80% less than what I get on my Hebrew posts.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, that kind of makes sense to me. I think that there was, like you were saying, there's like this, I'm putting words in your mouth, but I'm take on it. That there's kind of like this, like, oh, we're the cool club, we're Israeli speaking English, like the in club, a little snobby, a little thing like that, and to kind of like a little kind of like a down to earthness. As someone who's a LinkedIn marketer, I feel this a lot, particularly, there's a lot of that in tech in general throughout the world. It's not uniquely Israeli.
Yes.
It's like the common man. It's just the common man language in Israel is Hebrew.
Yes, I have to push back a bit on that sentiment. I don't think it comes from a place of arrogance. I think it comes from a place of wanting to appear like professional,
I didn't say
or like snobby.
Yeah. Oh, you think professional, not the. Okay.
Yeah.
You don't think it's like an in or a class or okay.
No. From my understanding, I definitely think it comes from a place of trying to appear like professional and global.
Why does that? But I mean, I see everyone engaging with these Israeli posts in English. Israelis posting in English, and they're overwhelmingly Israelis. Anyway, even when they post in English,
right?
I don't know who they're trying to appeal to globally. I think that people think, oh, it's relevant to a lot more people, and I have whatever 20% connections. Probably don't speak Hebrew. I don't know. Like, so I understand that they're like, oh, there's more mass appeal, right? LinkedIn is a platform that way, right? Facebook, you'll see more Hebrew. I have a friend, Yotami said he started a post and tweet in Hebrew, and he said the engagement went through the roof when he started tweeting in Hebrew. He tweets about all kinds of stuff, and it was fascinating. Very strong Twitter engagement in Hebrew. There is something to it. I mean, I follow some people in Hebrew on Twitter, and even though it's not a lot of characters, I don't have the brain strength usually to like read it, even though I could read it and understand it, even if it's like 11 words, I'm still clicking translate tweet. So, it's like
and I think that Israelis who are engaging on LinkedIn in Hebrew have the exact same sentiment that you do.
That's exactly what I was thinking. And it's longer content than a tweet,
yes.
which is what I'm thinking. I think it's just like, it's like, my brain has to work harder when I'm reading in Hebrew as opposed to English. And I'm getting that with a tweet, and especially with the fast dopamine, so the scrolling through a news feed, being able to provide that to people in their mother tongue makes a significant difference.
Right. And that's why it all comes down to target audience. Who is your target audience? So just a quick background on like my LinkedIn journey. I opened up a profile when I was in college because like everyone was doing it. I thought it was just like a way to have an electronic resume that I can forward onto recruiters. I never actually used it. I didn't land any jobs through it ever. It just sort of lay dormant for like a few years.
Maybe do the opposite. Maybe they saw it and they're like, don't hire this guy.
And then I used my personal Facebook profile to like write personal thoughts. Someone mentioned to me that I should cross post a particular post I wrote into LinkedIn. It was actually a post I wrote about whether should you learn to code. And it was sort of in response to multiple questions that I was getting from friends who was just advising on a casual basis on people who wanted to get into high-tech. They wanted to learn a technical degree. Should they invest 3 years in studying computer science? I wrote that. It got a lot of positive engagement and feedback on my personal profile. And then one of my friends said, this is a great LinkedIn post. Like you should just copy and paste it there. So I did that, and it got a little bit of engagement, which was cool. So that was like my first real that was like my first testing of the waters of LinkedIn. And then I posted a couple more things in English. It didn't really go anywhere. Went back to just like my regular Facebook profile. And then occasionally I also started writing a little bit more in Hebrew because I just sometimes, I mean, at this stage, I'm basically like totally bilingual. So sometimes I'll have a particular idea for a post that just comes to me in Hebrew, and other times it'll come to me in English.
What do you mean it comes to you? What does that mean? I mean, look, I'm bilingual, but I think your Hebrew is better than mine. Because I don't write posts in Hebrew, but I guess I could if I really wanted to make my life difficult for myself. Like, what do you mean a post comes to you in a language? Why does one post come to you in Hebrew and one in English? Is it like because it was stimulated by someone you spoke to in Hebrew? So some reason later on that thought was came to you in Hebrew. How does that happen? Explain that to me.
I think that's one example, but one thing that I've come to realize is that my thought process and vocabulary is very context specific. So I'll just give you an example. If you serve in the army for 3 years, it's a very intensive Hebrew-based environment, and you learn a very specific vocabulary that is specific to the job that you do. And I, for the life of me, wouldn't know how to translate those specific terms and slang into English. So you become very well versed in like a small number of phrases and words, say under 1,000, and those become your regular day-to-day words and phrases and way of communicating.
Right.
So whenever I want to, recount a particular memory from that moment, or converse, or give a story, right? All of those phrases and words that were used and the memories and the conversations I had come up in a Hebrew-speaking context.
Right.
Right. Conversely, like if I'm thinking about, my days in Australia, growing up there in high school, come up in an English-speaking context. Also in my day-to-day. So my day-to-day over here, like with my colleagues, I'm speaking in Hebrew. But meetings with, the folks over in the US and California, that's in English. So I feel that like living between these like two worlds in sort of like this bilingual lifestyle of living within Hebrew-speaking bubbles and English-speaking bubbles. So you can really derive from those different experiences, different thoughts. And sometimes when I think about a particular event, it'll come to me in a particular language based on the social milieu or the particular environment that I was in. So that's just like a very, I haven't really gone like deep into like thinking about this, but that's what my assumption is. Like sometimes something just like comes to me in Hebrew. So for example, I wrote a particular post in Hebrew and I decided to cross-post that into LinkedIn. It was actually a post called 10 Things I Learned from My Service in the Army. So that was a post for me that was very like Hebrew specific. It wasn't English specific at all. It would have come out a little bit, a little bit jumbled and maybe slightly gibberish if I would try to like, and maybe a bit awkward if I would have tried to convert that and translate that into English. So I decided to keep it as authentic as possible, quote unquote, in my mind, and leave it in its original form in Hebrew. And so I cross-posted that into LinkedIn. And at the time, this was 11 months ago. So, I had a handful of connections, basically a bit of a nobody on LinkedIn. I posted it and it went viral overnight. So someone with less than 500 connections and a post that got like more than 100,000 engagements and views.
Whoa, impressive.
So
when was this, by the way? How long ago?
This was just under a year ago.
Okay. Yeah, because LinkedIn did some big algorithm updates like about a year and a half ago, last summer. So I was wondering if it was since then. Yeah, go ahead.
And I think like that was sort of my light bulb moment where I said, whoa, there's something really cool over here on LinkedIn that, allows someone who's relatively unknown to, just based on the merit and quality or virality of the post itself, to get very big very quickly. Maybe similar in some ways to TikTok, as opposed to say, on my Facebook profile, that same post would get like 15 likes and one of them is my mom and another one is my sister. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So and I think that there's something about having that level of engagement that really incentivizes content creators to keep going. So I set a goal for myself to post one idea a day. That's also my tagline on LinkedIn.
Right. That's your headline. I love that, by the way. I absolutely love that. There's no way the accountability of that is amazing.
Yeah. And also
it also
like
gives people reason to follow you as opposed to you're just another LinkedIn profile of a person that doesn't post, engage, or create content.
Yeah. So I also think that like the algorithms of social media platforms in general always tend to favor recency of something that was posted recently over other stuff. Doesn't matter how incredible or viral a post was from 3 years ago. There's very little reason for it to be prioritized by the algorithm, today. But something that was posted 15 minutes ago, that's like something that'll probably come up. So awesome. Someone who posts consistently, that's a surefire way to like build yourself up and build a following on social media.
For sure, no doubt. What would you? So let's switch gears here. You do some Israel advocacy and stuff, and you have online. Tell us a little bit about kind of your work there.
So as a side hobby, I create documentary style historical videos that try to explain the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, like a basic 101. Try to keep it as neutral and factual and objective as possible. So some examples of videos that I created was a historical and legal background into the property dispute in Sheikh Jarrah in the Jerusalem neighborhood, Shimon HaTzadik. Another one is like a background to the Temple Mount. Why is there a conflict there? Gaza Strip, history, background, context. Why did it begin? Why are they fighting? And sort of like
history. You go back to biblical, I assume, right? You go back to the
I try to provide the full picture, and if there's a requirement to go to biblical, I definitely do. And the idea is like my sort of imagined target audience is like someone who has like no idea, like explain this to me like I'm 5 kind of thing, like someone who's unaffiliated, no idea. just like tell me everything from scratch from the very beginning, and try to keep it as objective as possible, because I don't want to alienate people based on their political views or religious background.
Right.
I want it to be a very accessible video. And I also believe when it comes to like hasbara, and when it comes to sort of like showing Israel, I think that, you know, a lot of times the truth just speaks for itself, and there really is no reason to sort of push a particular narrative, because I think a lot of the pushback against Israel comes from misconception. It comes from sort of like the slogans. It comes from like the sound bites. But someone who goes and delves deep and understands the context and the history and the facts, that the picture becomes nuanced enough for someone to basically view Israel in a different light. And I think that's what's lacking a lot from the discussion, which is what
I'm going to play devil's advocate there. I am 5% of people are interested in diving deep, if even. I think I'm being generous. Looking at things nuanced. Let me go and read up on the history. I mean, most people are just kind of going through life, are ignorant about most things, don't care about nuance. Most people don't even know what that word means. Like, so how do you, like, you know, like, I agree that's important and that's relevant to a lot of people. And that's relevant to probably a lot of people that are influence others, those that dive deep, think, those ones that are creating more content, sharing your content, etc. Yes, including, and then those that are more ignorant will see it. But I think if there isn't the facts don't help. Yeah, not don't help. Sorry, I should take that back. What do they say? Right, by the time the truth gets up and like puts on the shoes, the liar made its way around the world. You know what I mean? I think there needs to be a little bit more of an emotional and a justice perspective here, no? In order to be able to actually to reach more people, or I mean, it could just be like, you know, you're all into the fact. Everyone's in. People like making different content, and I don't know. I'm just curious, like, what do you think about what I just said?
Well,
because it's definitely being used against us.
I think that
anti-Semites use justice and, you know, justice and emotions that are based on falsehoods in order to get people to attack Jews, Israelis, etc. You see that at FIFA now. You see that from, you know, socialists on the far left. You'll see that from right now from Kanye West and Nick Fuentes. You know, they you know, it's like justice, you know, take down the man, take down the Jew, take that, and there's a lot of emotional thing, and that's actually based on absolutely no facts, right? And it seems like that spreads like wildfire, and the facts never did. So I don't know. Do you find that it's very limiting?
I question how much you can fight emotion with emotion. I'm saying someone who's.
I didn't say fight it. Put out your own emotion. I don't know. I'm just saying. Only because I was responding to what you were saying about, like, you know, I think you'll have a much greater impact if I just put out facts, and then people will go in and they'll dive deep and they'll watch my life long videos, and then they're gonna think about things through nuances and facts only, and they're gonna, you know, maybe suppress their more subjective and emotional parts. You didn't say that. If I added that, you know what I mean? But I just don't. Unfortunately, I mean, humans, we all squishy brains, and we're all easily manipulated. You know. And we respond more to emotions than than we do to historical facts. People are so ignorant of history anyway.
So I think that people who are already emotionally invested one way or another, that's not the target audience, because you're probably not going to.
Right, I agree with you. You're not going to change someone that's already emotionally invested, right? But the ignorant are still humans, and they get emotional about things. They probably may not give a shit about Israel, and, you know, look how emotional people are being about soccer, right? So, you know, it's like, so everyone's emotional to some extent in certain things. So maybe it's channeling that is better. But if you think of, you know, if there's, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here. I've just noticed that a lot of Israeli Hasbara is garbage because it tries to play the factual, which is accurate and just and on, you know, and is very pro-Jewish, and our history is very clear. But I worry that doesn't get us, you know, more than, let's say, 5% of the ignorant population, which I would say 80% of the population would probably be ignorant on any matter in Israel.
Well, I also think it really comes down to execution, right? Like you can be factual, but you can be bad at presenting, right? It also matters how you package it, how objective you are perceived to be. And I also think that the target audience here really matters. So I think I remember, like, think it's a quote from Alan Dershowitz. He said, I'm not speaking to the 10% here on the left that's pro-Israel. I'm not speaking to the 10% of people here on the right in this hall who are pro-Palestine. I'm speaking to the 80% of people who are in the middle who don't.
That's what I'm talking about. They're ignorant. Yep.
Who aren't so invested in what's going on. Then they're not so interested. Maybe they're slightly interested. Maybe pique their curiosity a bit, but they haven't formed an opinion yet. Like that's your target audience. Like,
right. I agree with that. Yeah.
Right. And so then the question is like, how do you reach those people, right? Because that's the majority, right? Like that's your target audience. Someone who's already like extremely pro one side or the other isn't going to be swayed by like a 5-10 minute video on YouTube. But someone who hears about the conflict, for example, coming up day in, day out on the college campus, the first time like they're really being exposed to it, and then they want to learn more. Like, what are they going to do? They're probably going to like go into YouTube and say, 101 Israeli like history of like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. They might read the Wikipedia page, right? Like that's probably how they're going to form their opinion based on that.
Right. Awesome. Great. Beautiful. Avi, if people want to, let's say, follow you on LinkedIn, I guess they just search Avi Lewis Meta, they'll be able to find you. And if people want to follow you on other socials, YouTube, anything, how can people find you and be updated on what you're talking about when it comes to finding employment in tech in Israel and learning more what you're doing, helping explain things in a balanced, nuanced, and factual way for those that are actually into facts, which I thought was something of the past, but maybe not.
So I post daily in Hebrew on LinkedIn. Everyone's willing on topics related to Israeli high tech, employment, tips how to get into high tech, how to pass the interview process, technological advancement and inspiring technology that's coming out. I also have Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. So maybe we'll post those in the comments section.
Awesome. Oh, wait, I got a couple of good comments. Can I just throw them up here? They're really good questions.
Sure.
And Ram says, I totally forgot we were doing an AMA. It was on full screen and I didn't see it. I think these days the majority of people who are experienced, if anyone has any questions, drop them now because it takes 2 minutes for them to come up. I think these days the majority of people who are experienced with remote jobs won't agree to strict rules. This went back to like what Elon Musk was saying, right? So, I mean, for those that don't know Twitter, right, he was like, he fired half the people and then, or 25%, I don't know, it doesn't matter. And he was like, all right, this is going to be like hardcore mode working here. If you want to, people that are already got used to cushion down don't want to come back. What do you think? I do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that the more experienced someone is, right, and the more sought after they are, the more leverage they have to dictate their terms of employment. And you see this with Twitter as well, right? Like the highly experienced staff and principal software engineers who like form the backbone of Twitter, those who are either let go and then they ask them to return, or those who decide to voluntarily leave because of the change in because of the change in conditions. So they probably won't be coming back to Twitter, and also they know that they can leverage their background and experience, they're highly sought after, to quite easily get a new job. Because at the end of the day, despite the layoffs and despite the downturn right now in high tech, top talent will still always be able to find a new home.
Right, but I bet Elon Musk said that if you're a high performer, we'll work with you with being remote. But you've had to already demonstrate being a high performer before you bought Twitter. I would like to give a counter argument. By the way, I agree with you earlier on largely. I'll give a counter argument. I had an employee, fantastic man, and he was single in his 30s, and he was like, look, he went to go move to Tel Aviv, he wanted to get married. You try to find someone who's single, and he was in like Ranana. And then he was like, look, I can't do this remote anywhere more. I need to go look for a full-time in-house position because I need a social life. I'm looking for the social life. I'm young, I'm single, I need to get married, I need to meet people. I'm prioritizing it. So I do think some people, right, obviously some people love working in the office and people love the social aspect. Some people see, their work is their fulfillment, and it should be for everyone to some extent. It is their social life. It is for everyone to some extent, right? It is their hobby for everyone in something. It is so work does so much good for people. And so I think some people stay in work late, especially, they're covering dinner. And if you love the people that you're working with, I don't think it's about strict rules. I think it's about the environment that you're in. And if you're in an environment with a bunch of other people, kind of like you feel like the army, like we're all in this together, right? With these strict rules, hey, we're all staying, in the office late tonight to, get this project off the ground together. We'll get pizzas and we'll get some beers towards the end of the day. Like, I think that people will find that more attractive, particularly if you're younger and don't have a family in particular. All right. Deborah says, I also get a much higher engagement when I reach out in Hebrew. That's good. That's interesting. As Yoel said, if English isn't your mother tongue, your brain has to work a little harder. Also, Hebrew feels more personal when reaching out to potential Israeli clients. This is fantastic, actually. That is a really good last point as a marketer. What do you think?
Spot on.
Right? It really is. It's a personal touch. Like, hey, we have a common denominator, a cultural one more than anyone, and a communication one if you're speaking in the non-international language, so to speak. That does give you a better touch point, and I think you'll catch someone's intention in, let's say, your LinkedIn inbox or Twitter DMs if you were to speak Hebrew, or if you're in another country, a small country that has another language. Thank you, Dora. David, interesting in terms of content. If Hebrew is also much shorter and to the point, as culturally as it generally is, as opposed to long form and nicely wrapped English content. Why is that a question mark? But if Hebrew is also much shorter and to the point, okay, I don't know why that was a question. If you have anything, by the way, that is interesting. If you ever look, let's say, like in a Siddur or anything that has like a translation, Hebrew or English, like the Hebrew is always much shorter. It is more to the point and to concise. But also something I've noticed, which is just a side comment, this has to do with font. I know it's random, but like you'll see this in your highways, or even if you type, like the Israeli font, it's equivalent for its same font if you use like Arial 12 Hebrew or Arial 12 English. The English is a little bit larger. You'll see this in highway signs too. I find it very infuriating. Why can't they just make the Hebrew a little bit bigger? But that's just like the print, the print font. Anyway, okay. Sorry, I missed those comments and those questions. We'll land the plane here. Avi, thank you so much for joining. It was a lot of fun, and I hope we do this again. And please keep helping other people. And anyone hearing this, if you can help anyone find a job or find work in the tech industry or in general, that is a huge service you can do. And you can also reach out to Avi. Maybe he can help you or people in your network. Avi, thank you so much for everything that you're doing, helping people, that make an Aliyah transition here in Israel, build a family by helping them find gainful employment in the tech industry. Keep it up. I love what you're doing, man.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.